spoken about last time. So last time I spoke about that an important part of our training at this time is to reconnect and remember forgotten psychological adaptations, stemming from the longest stretch of human evolutionary time. A time when our forebears have been living as hunter-gatherers in highly mobile, small, egalitarian groups. And genus Homo, which also includes us, plus all of our extinct relatives, has a timeline stretching back roughly about 2.5 million years. And I looked it up a little bit on the net. And over those 2.5 million years, there are about 4 so-called key species. The first one is Homo habilis, and then Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and then us, Homo sapiens. And Homo habilis is one of the earliest members and has appeared around 2.3 to 1.6 million years ago. It's incredible, difficult to imagine actually, and is known for tool use. And after that, Homo erectus appeared around 1.8 million years ago, was more advanced and spread across Africa into Asia. And then Homo neanderthalensis is our closest extinct relative, has lived in Europe and Western Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. So there were times when there were more than one species living on the planet, up to 3 species. So Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, and Homo sapiens, they met at times and also interbred. And then finally Homo sapiens, modern humans, have emerged around 300,000 to 200,000 years ago in Africa and then spread worldwide. And meanwhile, we have become a real problem, for the biosphere, because we have developed in a way which is not sustainable. And then at the same time, this psychological adaptation resulting from this very, very deep time from which we have come are deeply inscribed in all of us, mostly on an unconscious level. And then sometimes, some of the memories can dart out under certain circumstances. For example, I spoke with a friend and she said when she smells a wood fire, when she walks on the beach and somebody has a wood fire, that brings up a strong sense of memory. Or, I've had that when walking into certain caves, have a strong sense of bodily memory which cannot really be articulated in words, but a kind of a knowing. So, and without, considering this, we can't really fully understand ourselves today. And, I want to share one more time that image in a cave, which I've shared already a few times, because it's to me very, very evocative. Just, allowing this to be felt, to be sensed in the body, in the torso in particular. And it's also like a way of allowing this to be sensed and felt, not just like looked at with the head. And it can take time. And thanks to a better understanding of our evolutionary history, we know that these deep yearnings for a lived connectivity, which I think brings us together here in these Wednesday sessions, is not simply a matter of superstition, but these are ancient evolutionary acquired structures of human psychology, which rumble around our systems, and sometimes they demand more attention than at other times. And there can be certain triggers, where they become conscious for a moment. And the mind really can't grasp it. The thinking mind can't really capture it and doesn't have to capture it. We can just allow it to reverberate, through the system and reactivate a memory which could be helpful at these times, where we have forgotten how to live in partnership with the biosphere, where we have, certain amount of centuries gotten lost in trying to dominate and a certain, assumption of human supremacy. And now we start to understand, hey, that was a little bit too small. It doesn't work like this. And there's lots of material on the net. You can Google it. Some are more evocative than others. I found that especially powerful. Okay, I'm gonna now end the screen sharing. And then, another process which is happening right now is the increasing pressure within and on the biosphere through climate change and also through loss of biodiversity. And because our own bodies, are part of nature, we are all nature, we are not separate from that stress, which the biosphere is in. And, and depending on how we are meeting that stress, it can either be something, to get really, very hopeless and helpless about it, or we can receive it as an urge to evolve. And I think that's what I try to do and also try to share here on the Wednesdays, this urge to evolve. A kind of urge for us to remember and reconnect with the intelligence of millions of years of living, which is encoded in and as our bodies, these human bodies, which have evolved over these 2.5 million years. It's obvious, that they have appeared, but before that, that was also part of that process. So it's actually much longer than 2.5 million years. It's actually as long as there's no limit to it. Maybe we say it started when the planet formed, but that's also an assumption. So this intelligence of millions of years of living encoded in and as our bodies, and all of the emotional, mental, spiritual and relational capacities which allow us to use that wisdom that is encoded as and in our bodies, individually and collectively. there's a lot of speaking in many different ways, of more and more people, becoming conscious that this is an avenue to take now, where our intellect can't really go there, but the intellect can support that. But the body, knowing with the body, or the body as an organ of listening, is a different kind of knowing. We can call it intuitive. Or we can just say, learning to listen to and with the body is what is asked of us now in this time of transitioning to a different way of relating to planet Earth. No longer, as a storehouse for extraction, but as who we deeply are, actually. And for this assignment, we need to reveal the information that is stored in our bodies, not just in my body as a person, but in my body as a continuum that is millions of years old. And it's a different way of looking, really, at the body. And this is, what evolution looks like. It's, different ways of looking, opening up, opening up, opening up more. So, we can shed the idea that my body is as old as my passport says, in order to unlock this wisdom that is millions of years old and knows of ways of living as part of the biosphere, as Earth, as our name says. Human comes from humus, means basically earthling. And we have been so audacious to call ourselves Homo sapiens, the wise earthling. And maybe it's exactly our species, which will realize that fact, that we are part of Earth. Having emerged and then gone all the way, gone a real huge roundabout, and then come back home, where they say, going around the whole world and then coming back in your backyard, and the treasure you have been seeking, or I have been seeking, is actually there in the backyard, right under our feet. And it looks to me like this is a similar trajectory. So my body as a continuation of lifetimes of development since the beginning of this planet, and more obvious since the emergence of genus Homo 2.5 million years ago. And as we are rooted in the Buddha's brilliant Dhamma, there's a safety net for us from which we can say yes to this urge to evolve and what it means to be an earthling at this time in history. And the Buddha has said 2,600 years ago, I don't remember now in which of the suttas, but saying, all you need to know is in this fathom-long body. And it is really true. And, in these transition times, to remember the Buddha was touching the earth in the night of his awakening. And he had been fulfilling his assignment, and then he had his last body at that time. We all still here, we, at least for now, we need to respond to this assignment, this pressure, this urge to evolve, individually and collectively, because these transition times are really, these are special times, and there have been many before this one. I think the last big one was, when Ice Age started to turn into what's called like the age of the forests, when all of this water came, from the melting of the ice. And living situations started to change dramatically. People became, and the forest started to grow, and there was very different skills were needed to hunt in such situations. And also, there was much more isolation between groups because of the forests and the waters, which came out, huge lakes and rivers and waters which hadn't been free to roam before the ice was melting. And now it's a different kind of change of scene on the planet, but it also has vast repercussions. For us, it's, ending of fossil fuels and what that requires in terms of changes is also huge. So that's really a calling us back to our deep capacity to adjust, because we have done it many times before, and now we need to do it again. And trusting that. Not in a way like, oh, I don't need to do anything, I just can trust, but trusting that if we are opening ourselves to these capacities, we'll know what to do, at least the next step. And we are all together in this. So let's now find a posture for meditation which works for about 40 minutes or so. And allowing the breath to take us into the body. Adjusting to the earth gravitational embrace. Which clearly shows us, where we belong. And feeling the blood pulsing in the body, in the fingertips, the neck. And then enjoying that automatic cycling, knowing that it is actually part of the larger water and mineral cycles of your region. The watershed, where we are in, is actually also in our bodies. And usually we just never think in this way. It's something we need to train ourselves in. Just as our blood nourishes our bodies, the water is the blood of the earth, and the rivers and creeks are her arteries. just noticing your breathing and the weight of the body. Any kind of stress or tiredness, just allowing it to drop down. Drop down into the soil underneath where we are sitting. And as the water is the earth's blood, so the oxygen is the breath of our larger earth body. And also feel your own energy. Which might, become a little bit more into the foreground as you are settling down. Kind of rising more into awareness. And also noticing the muscle tone. And also being aware that the source of this energy is the sun. All of life on this planet is a call and response between the earth and the sun, which rains down photons on the earth. And with each heartbeat, this energy is released throughout the body, having come through to us, through the food chain, through eating plants or eating animals, all nourished and made possible by the energy of the sun meeting the earth. So this incredible process which is taking place, if we know it or not, and which is asking us now to make adjustments. You know, as we have, our species has made adjustments before. And us, you know, for us, it's really the question, do we want to heed that calling or not? Because, you know, life will do whatever it takes to stay alive. To preserve itself, and, you know, there's so much amazing developments we can witness looking back over evolutionary time. All of these incredible adjustments which have been happening. Incredible capacity for adaptation to make it work. And, you know, through opening and turning towards, we can intentionally partner, you know, with that intelligence. For our own benefit and for the benefit of all beings. Even, you know, there's a lot not knowing. Need a lot of tolerance for being with that not knowing, which is scary to many of us. I definitely have to, you know, make an effort to open to that again and again and again. Even intellectually, you know, I know maybe many things, but then to really live from that place is something else. And for that, you know, we have the Buddha's teaching to give us a framework on how to meet. In the Buddhist teaching is called ignorance. And grasping and clinging to that which is permanent and in constant flux. So instead of trying to figure it all out in the head with our individual intelligence, we need to learn to listen, listen to the body or listen with the body to what life is asking us at this time. What's moving in us? What is life looking for? Really sense and feel into that. And allow ourselves to be guided by it. And stay open and so that we are able to respond. And and the difficult point is, I think, to trust ourselves that we can do this. Because if we are looking back into deep time, we can see that has happened many, many occasions where there were intense transitions. And these were times, when people had much more sense of connection and respect and reverence for the earth. Devotion for the earth, as a living expression of the divine or the sacred. So to kind of reconnect with that. That's also part of what is asked for. Because we are really in a time of, crisis, and in times of crisis there is always two things happening at the same time. Something is ending and dying, and at the same time something new is being born. It's an opportunity for a change. And through the body, in particular eating, drinking, breathing, and so on, we're receiving instructions. Information. And the more we are feeling safe, to open to those instructions, the more we can, use the pressure of that stress of the biosphere, use it as energy, seeing it as an urge to evolve. Rather than trying to suppress it and turn away from it and distract ourselves, we say yes. Because we have the Buddha's teaching as a scaffolding to strengthen us so we can stay open. Or at least noticing when we are closing down. And meeting that with loving kindness, with a sense of softness and okayness that is part of such a challenging time, of course. And then we remember, it's not for the first time. And we are all together in this, if we know it or not. There is a change underway we need to embody. And these Wednesday sessions are here, to build a vessel together and individually to volunteer to embody that in the way, we can. It's many different ways depending on our gifts, where we are, where we come from. And we are not deciding or making this happen, but we are simply part of the earth as humanity. And these changes, are happening to the earth, and because we are part of her, also to us, of course. Regardless if we join in or not. They're already happening. But if we join in, then that stress, that pressure finds a way to move on, move through. And when fear comes up, then, really meet that fear with a lot of kindness, because of course there is fear. But if we are too lost in a fear, then our participation is impacted too much. So we need to work with it, and we have the Buddha's teaching for that. Knowing when fear has arisen rather than becoming that fear. That's the brilliance of this teaching, awareness of what has arisen rather than identification with it. That's the refuge in awareness, or a refuge in Buddha, in knowing what is present without losing ourselves in it, staying as the knowing, which is not a frozen state, but it's a process, a constant flow. And breathing some space into that, that's what we call practice. We don't need to control it. Life knows how to stay alive. But recognizing the aliveness, the vibrancy within our own bodies, and relating to that vibrancy, to that aliveness as guidance, is a kind of rewiring of the whole body. And that's how the guidance is received. Not by reading it in a book or something like that, or hearing it. It's a visceral knowing. And that's hard for us because we haven't been trained that way. Sensing and feeling isn't one of the big interests in our education system. And we need to do it together. Because everybody will receive these instructions in different pieces and bits of it, according to where we come from, our gifts. And then by working together, emergence takes on material form. And there's always the fear, which comes up. And it needs to be received with a lot of loving kindness. And often, it's the fear of a little child. And that little child needs to know that it is taken care of by that more mature part of ourselves, which can identify the urge to evolve. Is what it really is. And the one most important requirement really is to change the order how we receive these instructions, which flow through us, through coming to us from the universe, really. That we are not constantly putting the head above everything else, but learning from our mistakes, that this has gotten us into quite some trouble, and many other species as well. The intellect is a servant, a brilliant servant, but he can't be the master of this, because he can't really sense into the information, which is coming into our bodies, because our bodies are these organs of listening, of extension of the planet, and in that extension of the universe itself. And the universe doesn't speak to the head. And because this is all kind of not really part of mainstream culture, we need each other, to stay on course. And we know when we're on the right track, we can sense and feel it. When we're on the right track, even it isn't maybe pleasant, even it is challenging, but we know it. And we can pray. We can ask for guidance. It can be part of our daily routine, really, to take some minute, or it can take whatever long you can invest. It doesn't depend how long it is, but it's important that we remember it. Whenever we get drawn into fear, so this this very clear intention for expanding perception beyond the dictates of modernity. Which are simply crazy, because they could have never been fulfilled in the first place, but now there is no doubt. So, to connecting with our instinctive loyalty to the living planet, which is with us since the very beginning. Because we are not separate. So this instinctive loyalty, to nourish that back into more fuller recognition. Because what the earth needs from us is exactly that instinctive loyalty, which need to make itself felt within us again, as if it were our most private desire, that there's no difference. And that's a practice, really, because you can't just do it like at once. It takes time. It's a skill. It's a survival skill now. And there were times when it was just part and parcel of how people lived, and then it became animism, and then it became superstition, and it became something, which was considered primitive, and now it bounces back. And it confuses us, of course, but we can trust the intelligence of the process. And we can also remember that the Buddha himself was touching the earth in the night of his awakening. Asking the earth to be his witness that he has done his work. So a dynamic dialogue that enlivens our bodies. So that we can experience them as an extension of the planet. And the grief, which that brings, because we had been so distracted for so long. And the relief. So they're sitting in that paradox, between the grief and the relief. That's what it takes, to be rewired into something which is more capable of responding and taking responsibility. So in a minute or so, I'm gonna ring the bell again.